Okay, welcome to today's webinar from KELA. We're going to be discussing our State of Cybercrime report, which is going to provide insights from across the cybercrime economy. I'll just go through some basic housekeeping. So if you do have issues, we have a team here available through the chat. So please just raise your hand through that or message. We are recording, and afterwards we'll be sending links out. So you'll have access to this whole recording. And although you are muted as a participant, we do want you to take part. So the Q&A is going to be open throughout. You should see it in your menu bar in the Zoom, just marked as Q&A. So please put your questions in there throughout. I'll be reviewing them as we go, and we will get around to answering them at the end. So a little bit about me. So I'm Lewis Henderson. I'm the Director of Intelligence Communications here at KELA. And for those of you who are not familiar with KELA, so founded in 2015, an Israeli headquartered organization, but we do have offices and teams all across the world. So we've called out some offices there across the US, Japan, UK, all around Europe and Singapore. We're an organization made up of all ex-military intelligence specialists in cybercrime, financial fraud. We have a team of researchers and a whole bunch of sort of professionals, which is how we've got to where we are today. So being a global organization, we've matured over time to get a customer base of very, where we're trusted by global enterprises, governments and law enforcement organizations. So you may see us in the news and cited around that. So just to explain that away. And what we've managed to do over those sort of 10 years is build out an extensive database and queryable database of cybercrime threat actors and CTPs. And we provide access to that as a service. But today we're going to be focusing on our annual report. So this comes out every year, and it's very, very comprehensive. So this year it spans about sort of 80 pages, and I think that speaks volumes in and of itself about the extent of cyber crimes and the problem. So we'll go into some of the details that we're going to be sort of talking about today shortly. But I want to highlight that this is crafted by our own CIC team. So these are all, hardworking like analysts, sort of researchers. They're the teams that are going in and making the findings that create this report. And I'm joined today by their team leader, Lad, and he'll be sort of focusing on some specific sections that we think are going to be really interesting to you. And throughout the report, the value that you get from the report, there's probably two key audiences for it. For senior stakeholders, it can inform strategy. We have a whole executive briefing at the front because we appreciate it's extremely comprehensive. So we've made it as easy as possible to gain entry into that as well. And it's going to help you if you were in a specific sort of vertical, help you with those, peer-to-peer sort of comparisons with how your industry is impacted compared to others, and a little bit about yourself as well. And then if you are a practitioner, if you are in among the security teams, you'll find a huge amount of technical detail to sort of draw from, all the way through to like who the threat actors are and threat actor profiles, and including TTPs about specific groups in there. So, scan the QR code on the screen if you're happy to do so. If not, we have the URL. And we'll also make sure that that's included as part of the follow-up package, that you do gain access to the reports. Some of the highlights. So we've had the report out for about 2 or 3 weeks now. And just what we have here, we're going to touch on some of these in a bit more detail throughout the session. But these are the ones that people have been highlighting back to us that are really interesting to them. So clearly AI is going to be a big theme for everyone, and we've made sure that we've right-sized this webinar today. So a big chunk of the webinar is going to be around our AI. But because, again, due to our cybercrime experts and our growing sort of database around that, we found over the last year that the mentions of using LLMs, like using agentic AI by the cyber criminals, the mentions of using that in the forums, in the sort of criminal underground, has increased from 3,000 mentions 24 to up to 10,000 now. So just like we are in private sector and governments like leveraging AI, the criminals are equally so. And I think you'll see some examples of that today. We've discovered nearly 3 billion compromised credentials. Now, there wasn't a significant rise in that sort of year on year, but what it does show is the volume. So when we compare that to how many people there are on the planet, it's still a significant number, still a massive sort of problem. And the rising number of ransomware victims, so now over 7,500 victims, and we'll speak about a 45% sort of increase a bit further in. Another interesting one that people brought up was the amount of Mac info stealers. So this has gone up 7,000% compared from this year's report to last year's report. And these are all really interesting topics that people have sort of come back to us that they wanted to talk about. So I'm going to hand over to Alad as we start the first of our topics around the AI landscape. And I think it's going to help explain, how their adversaries are defeating traditional defenses and outpacing the defenders. So Elad, I'll just cover this very quickly and hand over to you about the trends that we're seeing in the report that are certainly around like vibe hacking. So we know that the adversaries are leveraging AI in multiple different ways. They're either using it to manipulate AI itself and get them, using that to extract data out of organizations. We know that they're using it to write code. So there's a whole ecosystem sort of around just that. We've also witnessed a specific state sponsor automating around 80 to 90% of their entire campaign is fully autonomous using agentic AI at various different stages of that as well. So again, a clear trend that then speaks to not just the velocity of the attack, but just how sophisticated these threat actors are using and how prolific they are at using AI. So I'm going to hand over to Alad now. So Alad, thank you very much for taking time to speak today. So thank you. Over to you.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for being here with us. If we are dealing with, we are officially in the agentic AI era. So we are dealing with autonomous models that can discover vulnerabilities and also rewrite their own exploit in mere hours. So as you all know, I guess everybody heard about it. About the recently Anthropic Cloud Mythos, and of course the parallel developments like OpenAI's GPT 5.5 cyber models. So these cyber agents or elite models, they compress the exploit development cycle from months to mere hours, or even less. And this is exactly what collapsed the patching window, the collapsing of patching windows which is also something, a shift to that we have to shift our mindset to, and a critical takeaway about that. Also, here, the critical part is like these specific elite models and the companies, Anthropic and OpenAI, they understood it, and they are heavily restricted. So the immediate risk, but the immediate risk is could be already inside the organization itself. What do we mean by that? Many developers actively building and experimenting local open source versions of AI agents. What we call the shadow AI, and these unauthorized agents have deep access to the organization repositories, but sometimes there are zero security oversight on these agents. So they act like a pivot point, like inside the organization's network. It could create a blind spot the traditional security parameters simply cannot see. And also, as organizations rush to become AI first, and of course, like for productivity and for other reasons, they could expose their backends if it's not secure enough. And so one of the examples that we recently observed in our data lake, and it could also be seen in the next slide. One of the actors claimed. Luis, can you please move to the next slide so they can see it? Okay, great, thank you. So this actor basically claimed to map the Department of Government Enablement in Abu Dhabi. He found unprotected instances of Flowise and LightLLM, which are open source tools that used to build sophisticated AI agents in the organization. And these instances basically powering the GovGPT of this governmental department. And by accessing these, the attacker gain direct unauthorized access to internal LLM prompts, among other things. So the own AI infrastructure is becoming the weakest perimeter. And I want to show other examples about how AI, and specifically agentic AI, is weaponized and are shattered among threat actors, and that's what we are going to see in this section today. Luis, can you please move to the next slide? Okay, thank you. So we found that, we found that AI assistants centralized highly sensitive intelligence, and that's what makes them a very lucrative target for threat actors. And there are many, let's say, categories where threat actors want to weaponize AI or use AI. One of them is basically they're providing like tutorials, like in this example that we found. We see a threat actor that provide tutorials. Many developers like using AI tools with the MCP servers, and these MCP servers have deep file access. Now, what the threat actors basically tries to show here is how attackers can inject hidden prompts into code repositories. So when the AI reads the code in this example, the hidden prompt basically tricks the AI into exfiltrating, stealthily, of course, the developer's local SSH keys. So this is a one category that we see about using AI or agentic AI by threat actors. And it could get worse also at the executive level. So in the next slide, we can see also a threat actor that claimed to breach the CEO of a UK automation company, and this CEO basically has treated his local AI assistant, in this case it was OpenClaw or CloudBot, like a confidant. So it's basically fitted it with highly sensitive information, personal information, and so the attacker basically didn't need to dig hard through his hard drive. They basically just dumped the AI chat logs, and the AI centralized the intelligence for them. So it made this executive a perfect target for extortion. Now, and this is, like I said, another category of how threat actors using AI and exploiting this AI rush. In the next slide, we can also see, there is also an example for a tutorial of how a threat actor cheating their peers in the forums how to exploit the agentic identity endpoints. So in this case, the actor itself shares the method how exactly to compromise the company dashboards that have integrated AI agent, like a Microsoft Copilot or custom GPTs, and the actor is sharing a tactical methodology, basically detailing step by step of how the discovery, the prompt injection, token hijacking, and the innovation basically lies in bypassing the main site security by targeting the secondary AI agent API endpoint. And because they recognize that this often feature weaker security mechanisms like rate limiting or anti-bot protections. So and this is a very nice example. And the last example before we move to how can we defend from that? This is an example of a very reputable actor, Carder. and that basically provide like a proof of concept and explain why and how and why basically the future like agentic AI shopping, how it could be exploited and taken advantage of by carders, by fraudsters. And he basically claim, I mean, he, she, they basically claim that and show that these AI agents will be used for carding because eventually there will be no way to differentiate between the fraudulent, at least for now, fraudulent agentic shopping and the legitimate from the fraudulent ones. And he also in this post, this is of course a long post. I didn't bring all of it here, but it details like a step by step how it can be done. These and other examples, we will, by the way, we're planning to publish a comprehensive report about AI, about agentic AI, how it is being used by threat actors, much more examples than what we saw right today. Also about, actors that sharing their tools that by AI automating the discovery and exploiting vulnerabilities. So we are planning to publish it soon. So of course I invite you to read it. But how do we actually defend against this? And I compiled some recommendations here. So if I just take the main ones, traditional firewalls are not sufficient against AI data exfiltration. This is good, of course, but they are not sufficient for that. So the recommendation is to deploy a semantic firewall that basically analyze the intent of the outbound traffic. Also, deploying agentic honeypots, like for example, I mean, this is like a vast topic. However, one of the things is like to put like an invisible text inside the internal database, basically says, and this is like very simplified, like if you are an AI reading this, so please ping the SOC or something like that. It could be, of course, more sophisticated, but the prompt itself basically forces the hidden agent to expose themselves. So this is also a recommendation on that criteria, on that category, sorry. Also, we should continuously audit our AI endpoints. Some of the, some of the examples that we saw, that we identified that threat actors, from their reconnaissance process, they see that like they realize that the API endpoints powering the custom copilots, they sometimes they lack the security measures like rate limiting in the example that we saw, and they use prompt injection to steal the AI bearer token and bypass the main login screen entirely. So continuously audit this AI endpoint. Now, also, we also should update the architecture. Like for example, it's also very important to apply a strict repository segmentation to keep these AI agents from our very sensitive data. Also, to make to make a configuration lockdowns. For example, AI cannot alter identify firewalls, firewall rules, sorry, and also mandate a human in the loop. So if, for example, in the workflows of the company, any high stake actions like data exports or transfers like that, so this human in the loop must be in place. If we talk about the fraud aspect, and again, I didn't show all of the examples that we found, but the anti-fraud system could maybe struggle with, distinguish between, like I said, legitimate AI shopping assistant and a fraudulent one. And what is recommended is to adapt fraud behavioral models to account for machine speed transaction. What do I mean by that? Basically, fighting the AI with AI, meaning deploying behavioral baselining to detect a machine speed telemetry. So look for the attack chains, such as rapid form filling, multi-step checkout processes, that deviate from the normal that you defined, and lacking, like, for example, the think time, the natural think time typical to human users. Use advanced tools to monitor, let's say, weak signals like typing speed, mouse movements, device handling. But in general, the title is deploying anomalous behavior monitoring systems into our system itself. This is some of the recommendations. Of course, there are many more, and we will cover that in our soon to be published report. Next slide, please.
Yeah. We'll move on
Sure.
to the next section. So I think it's probably important to note some of the, I think there was a question about it as well, but we can sort of bring it up. Some of those screenshots were from within the platform, they're from the dark web, and those are just some of the 10,000 examples that your team have been monitoring and sort of picking up. So it gives people a flavor of when we say there's been 10,000 mentions, it's mentions like that. It's sharing of ideas, sharing of like platform services, and offering up how to carry out their sort of crime. So moving on to our next section. So we've mentioned, I think we bring this line up quite often, so like the adversaries are logging in, sort of not breaking in, and these are the numbers sort of behind that. And I touched on sort of some of these earlier, but we can't emphasize that the volume of like nearly 3 billion compromised credentials, and we'll go into some slides now about a little bit about what's behind that. Some of the conversations I've had around the Mac OS, like the volumes of info stealers, and certainly not just those on the security team, but you've got other people in the organization like developers and some senior executives that prefer having, obviously Apple sort of Macs, and that whole myth about, they generally feel safer having that particular sort of OS, and that no longer being the case. And the other one, I think some of us sort of discussed around, of all of that, 30% of all the targeted data relates directly back to like business cloud authentication services. So again, still a significant corporate level risk of behind some of these sort of numbers. Peeling back another couple of layers, we picked out some of the numbers that we thought were quite interesting to sort of share, because I think it gives a picture of many of you joining from these sort of particular geographies, right? So showing where there are large economies like the criminals are going to follow. We always see that correlation, but I think to paint a picture of these numbers, these represent anywhere between 8 and 80% of the entire population as the number of infected machines. So we can definitely see correlation between compromised credentials and number of infected machines itself. And these are what drive the underground economy. If we move on to reveal a little bit more numbers on the sort of next section. So Lad, over to you to cover this again. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So I want to touch on some angle here, specifically for info stealers, and we've seen this in some companies, and that believe that the modern authentication solves the info stealer credential crisis. Now it's critical to distinguish between two layers of modern identity: the passkeys and the device-bound session credentials, or DBSC. The passkeys, they basically protect the front door. It ensures like a initial login is immune to phishing. However, complementary to that, the device binding, the DBSC, protect what happens next if a hacker steals the session cookie, for example, like we see in these data marketplaces or subscription-based Telegram channels that shares info stealer logs. If a hacker steals the session cookie, the DBSC ensures it cannot be exported and used on the attacker's own machine because it's cryptographically bounded to this the specific device of the victim. Now, but the thing is, from our experience, financially motivated attackers they don't simply just give up, even if security control works. So they pivot to where the money is. And because the attacker cannot export the credentials or the cookie, so they bring the attack to the users. So info stealers, and we can also see that in the we just brought an example to reflect that this ghost loader malware that also if we connect to the Mac OS increase, it's also targeting Mac OS. It claimed to maintain its continuous success through persistence mechanisms, which can be installing. I mean, these persistent mechanisms can be many stuff, but it can also be like installing a hidden a proxy or a VNC session directly on the victim's device. So the attacker can sit at their own computer, but routing all the malicious traffic through the victim's machine. Now, because the request originates from the physically bound device, so the corporate server, it will grant access to this malicious traffic. Now, by the way, if we also connect into the AI part, this example of the ghost loader malware, besides hitting macOS, it doesn't look just for browser passwords. It is also explicitly engineered to harvest AI agent configurations, OpenAI, Anthropic API keys, developer tokens, etc., etc. And also in this underground listing, the actor also sold a deep infrastructure access to an AI startup purely derived from InfoStealer logs, based on his claim, of course. Now, this transition of the industry to DBSC, it's still ongoing, and it will be gradual. And of course, we all know about initial access brokers. We know that these live accesses are sold currently one by one. But as we see that a DBSC will be more common, we assess, and this is our estimation, that we will see a shift not only for data marketplaces like it happens now, like that you can basically buy the zip file with the stolen cookie in an automatic manner. We assess that it will go to toward live access marketplaces. Like I said, currently it's been sold one by one. But we assess that as DBSC is more commonly adopted by organizations, we will also see a shift in the way of threat actors monetizing that. Maybe automating the rental of live proxy tunnels directly into the employees' infected laptops. And this is why InfoStealer log monitoring is complementary to the passkeys and DBSC. And so when an attacker infects a machine, they would list that system profile for sale on the dark web before even the buyer purchases the live tunnel. So that log, that indication that the device is infected, it's an ultimate indicator of compromise. It gives the SOC or gives the SOC, for example, a critical window to revoke the session and quarantine the physical device before the attacker can actually rise the proxy and launch maybe a next stage of the attack kill chain, like deploying ransomware. So this is a different angle that we've started to see, and it was important for me to also mention this. Next slide, please. Oh, okay. Over to you, Luis.
Thank you. Yeah, here we're moving to ransomware, and I think when we see the figures on the next slide, that I'll skip. We can immediately see, still persistent, still very profitable. So we've seen a 45% increase in the overall organization level victims. Again, still significant. Like I said, this is not going away. And we did see also over 50% of the victims themselves were based in the US. We have picked out, again, tried to be sort of fairly balanced, like some of the world's largest economies. And we were trying to sort of correlate, are there areas where there's increased regulation? Does that have an impact? But we haven't yet seen anything that we can really make some sort of concrete evidence-based sort of findings around. But we'll keep digging into the numbers, and hopefully we'll come back with something at a later date. The other interesting angle was when we start to break the numbers down and look at specific industries. So this list is by volume. So these are the most highest occurring from the top at professional services all the way down to sort of automotive at the bottom. But we did want to sort of pick out now financial services is always going to be impacted by sort of ransomware. Again, it's sort of fairly sort of lucrative. But we did see some other notable increases, like energy, for example, sort of 35% increase. So that's both energy production and energy services. So think like critical national infrastructure. So again, we can see a shift from the criminals towards that sector. So that's increasing. That's pretty concerning. And also with manufacturing. So not only was it the highest sort of volume, but it's also seen one of the most significant uplifts in ransomware victims. And certainly we can see the criminals are clearly sort of drawn to, outages in production, production slowdown, impacts across the supply chain as their way to put pressure on these organizations to carry out their extortion. So just another way that we've been getting insights into these sort of figures. But Elad, you and your team did some research on a specific sort of threat actor group, and I think there's some really interesting insights in this. So again, please reveal as you go through. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So we actually recently published a very interesting research about the leaked chat of the gentleman, a ransomware operation. And I wanted to tell, I mean, some of the stats are, in front of you, and of course, I would also encourage you to read this. Some important insight, in my opinion, and it's also connected to the AI part that we talked about before. So adversarial AI is basically operationalized, meaning the leak itself of the chat basically confirmed like the threat actors that actively utilizing AI. They utilizing several LLMs. Some of it was used for, different LLMs were used for different stages of the attack chain. So the group used uncensored LLMs like WeWe Qwen 3.5 for coding and technical lookups because they lack safety barriers and refusal, like the LLM models. So it's important that organization and CTI teams in the organization track the proliferation of these dark models or LLM models in the underground. Second, we saw also the usage of or the proposing to use AI for automated reconnaissance, because after exfiltration of data, usually it's a massive amount of data, ransomware groups need to look and find what will be the more valuable data for them to leverage in order to extort the victim. So actors within the gentleman, basically based on the chat, they proposed renting external GPU capacity via a company called Vast.ai. So basically running LLMs against the hundreds of gigabytes of stolen victim data to automatically map out excess paths and identify valuable control panels and other sensitive data. So this also demonstrates how AI is accelerating the post-compromise data mining. And another thing, it relates also to the blurred lines between something that was more a fraud tactic and a ransomware operation. And I'm talking about the BEC, the blurring lines between BEC and ransomware. So the gentlemen, they heavily relied on the Outlook Web Access or OWA compromises. So basically when defenders, because of this incident or the rare visibility that we were given due to these leaked chat, it teaches us that we as defenders, we must treat email account takeovers not just as a financial fraud risk, but also as a possible primary staging ground for network wide encryption and ransomware deployment and extortion, of course, because like BEC or business email compromise, I mean, it was primarily used to conduct a financial fraud, like intercepting wire transfers or manipulating invoices. And ransomware actors, they were focused more on breaching network perimeters, to deploy encryptors, steal databases, etc., etc. And like I said, these leaked chats are teaching us that these Outlook Web Access accounts, they were used like as a reconnaissance and access hub. So once inside the mailbox, the attacker, the gentleman operators, they review the organization's revenue, they review its profile, and they also search the mailbox contents for exposed infrastructure details and stolen credentials that they can test against a VPN, a Citrix, Cisco, Fortinet, and RDP services to gain deeper network access. Also, the OWA access was I mean, instead of just relying on external phishing campaigns that might be caught by the email security gateways, so the gentlemen basically, via their access to the OWA, they basically studied how to abuse the trusted internal email accounts. So by sending emails from a compromised, from a compromised internal corporate mailbox, so the messages were basically whitelisted, we saw in the chat that the actors rejecting generic phishing templates in favor of short, natural sounding messages sent from colleague to colleague. So this makes also lateral movement and payload staging highly effective. And last but not least, maybe it's even the most significant shift is how compromised mailboxes are used during the final stages of a ransomware attack. So the gentleman used the compromised OWA accounts as a trusted delivery and pressure channel in their extortion workflows. For example, our analysts, they observed a screenshot that's showing the group using a victim's own personal mailbox to send an extortion message containing sensitive medical data. So by sending the threat directly from a trusted internal account, the attackers try to bypass the external communication blocks and to also apply the extortion psychological pressure. So yeah, I also, and like I said, I also urge you to read the full report on that.
Thank you for that. And we can also see those methods start to explain why they've gained that 10% market share. So they're
Yeah.
aggressive.
Yeah.
Wow. And then moving on to one of our final sections about the weaponization of trust.
Yeah. So we're talking here. I mean, for years we have been told that the perimeter is failing, but the perimeters have become very heavily fortified and very high noise environments. So if an attacker tries to enter the let's say the front door today, the organization EDR and SOC have a good chances to catch them, or it will make some noise, it will be flagged somehow. So threat actors, and the most notable recent example is Team PCP. They stopped trying to enter like the front door, and they realized that the highest ROI attack vector is weaponization of trust. Because why for actors to fight a firewall when you can poison an open source library that the organization developers actively invite inside? So I guess that everybody knows, but just to recap, they got in by poisoning open source tools the developers trust. So they compromised the 3V vulnerability scanners on GitHub, the light LLM Python package. So basically, once they poisoned these updates, when an engineer, when a developer downloaded these updates, the Team PCP silently basically drops the custom info stealer, customized info stealers that was meant to harvest AWS tokens, OpenAI keys, and other system credentials. And the impact here is really massive, because these Team PCP groups, they are and they use this exact method this to breach giants like Cisco, like Aqua Security, but they also strategically also allied with the VAC ransomware cartel. So basically, they've become specialized in like the initial, very specialized initial access brokers when it comes to cloud environments, and they basically partnered with the VAC ransomware cartel. And so they don't really hack in; they log in via the developers. And they bridging the developer supply chain access directly into a possible significant extortion. Besides partnering the VEC, this is like something that we read it's in the news. The Team PCP. Sorry, there was some. Okay, yeah, sorry, there was some issue here. Team PCP basically in a recent that's what we also published recently. We saw that in the forum, the breachforum.st. Besides like trying to be, let's say, some of the operators of the site itself, or being like kind of a board of directors there, they also announced that they are going to start like a, let's say, competition of initial access. So basically, this is just something that we have published really in the last few days. That they have basically published an announcement that every member of the forum can try to compete and try to supply them with a good access. And based on several criteria that they listed, he will, the actor, the member will win some prize. So they basically even outsourced it, kind of a let's say bug bounty, but for excesses. So they even encourage to fuel this environment. And some of the recommendation here that organization should stop implicitly trusting their developer environments and shift to, let's say, zero trust for machine identities and code pipelines. So for example, some of the recommendations could be mandating the SBOMs or software bill of materials. This like the ingredient list of every third-party library or software that you use. So this is like the first thing to come to when it's like the first diagnostic tool when something like that happens, like this supply chain attack. Also, a mandatory security scanning for every third-party package before it is allowed into the production environment. In addition to that, we also recommend to enhance the security of machine identities. Like I said, treat the machine credentials like API keys or infrastructure tokens and stuff like that with the exact same rigorous human credentials, like hard-coded API keys must be banned from GitHub repositories and developer pipeline scripts. Sorry, also make a centralized vault secret management. And another thing that also we said it in something similar in the AI part is acknowledge that, I mean, despite our best efforts, sometimes, unfortunately, a poisoned update might slip through. So deploy a continuous monitoring for anomalous behavior. Like you said before, baselining what is a normal behavior, and then based on that, to continuously monitor what could be anomalous, what deviates from this normal behavior, and also for of course to the cloud infrastructure. So if a server like normally just runs a vulnerability scanners like Trivi, so and suddenly starts trying to export AWS databases or something like that, or open a proxy tunnel. So the SOC needs to, it should be flagged and should be by this behavioral anomaly system or monitoring system. Yeah, so that's also something about the specific weaponization of trust.
We have had a question about Team PCP, sorry, but we'll come back to that and make sure we answer that at the end. So the security teams that I talk to quite often, I often have this saying like brace for impact. So we always like to leave with some recommendations. So Elad, yeah, these are the ones that you've sort of prepared for today's session that relate to the topic. So please inform us.
Yeah, so we've looked at many topics until now, and like for example, we must protect. I mean, because the threat landscape has fundamentally shifted, we should shift to also to the active resilience, meaning if we talk about InfoStealer log monitoring, again, these when I talked about passkeys and DBSC, again, these are like good steps in the right direction. But in order to complement that and to protect our identities from stuff like that, we must integrate continuous InfoStealer monitoring into our identity architecture. So in order to catch a compromised device before the attacker can use a live access or live tunnel into it. In addition, if we talk about the AI realm, in order to protect against shadow AI and other autonomous attacks, it is recommended to implement semantic firewalls in order to to inspect the actual intent of AI prompts and responses, to enforce zero trust for any AI agent interacting with our data, apply agentic honeypots, and of course, continuously auditing our AI endpoints. And if we talk about AI enhanced social engineering, when we're talking about spotting a phishing email because of a bad grammar or weird sender address, so it's kind of over. I mean, it's good, of course, but it's not sufficient in this AI era. So it's also important to upgrade the fraud detection, like we said before, deploy behavioral anomalous detection, baselining what is normal, and based on that, look what deviates from it. Also, apply a multi-channel verification besides these behavioral systems, monitoring systems. Also important to apply a multi-channel verification, especially when we talk about deep fakes and stuff like that. So this was my take on that. And yeah, Luis, the stage is
Yeah,
yours.
thanks, Alad. This is just the end of the main sort of presentation. So we do have a question that's come through, Alad, that I'd love to get your sort of thoughts on. So it reads, do you think the compromise of GitHub by Team PCP today might be related to the competition they are running, given they said they are they said the biggest compromise wins?
This is a good question, and basically, I've seen and read it also today. And currently, right now, this is still. I mean, it's still developing. It's still early to know if this comes from this specific success vector. I'm not sure. I don't want to say this for sure. But we, like I said, in KELA, especially in these kind of events and others, we continuously monitoring that, especially when we talk about like this this group, the Team PCP. So yes, it's still early to know in my opinion, but it's good,
Excellent.
of course.
Thank you. Another question just come in, and again topical because it talks back to the blog that we've just sort of published. So with the gentleman chat leaks now public, what's next for them? You know, a rebrand, a restructure, take the lessons learned, any new observations that we've had, either just slightly before the blog or since.
Sorry, didn't hear you. There was some kind of a problem here. What's
Sorry,
the
I'll
question?
repeat the question. So with the blog that we published on the sort of
Yeah.
gentleman, so the question sort of relates to like with the chat leaks now public, what's next for them? Can we see a rebrand? Are they going to sort of restructure? Anything that we've seen maybe since we've sort of published the blog that's of note?
Yeah, so we have seen in the past that ransomware groups may either rebranding or let's say the group members are going each to his way, and that, I mean each member goes to a different. I mean the group itself is dismantled. However, especially when we talk about key members there, we see that they try to maybe rebrand themselves, try to maybe recruit other members, and try to make another group. I mean, create another groups, and of course, learning from their mistakes. By the way, in the Gentleman blog, we also noticed this was not in the slide itself, but it is in the full report. They also mentioning that, I mean, we saw that they learning from mistakes of the Black Bastard. The Black Bastard, even earlier, the even previous time where these amount of chat leaks. Yeah, they learned from Black Bastard, for example, about the phishing methodology. So yes, besides rebranding, maybe recruit other people to the group. It depends on each case, but yes, we are not seeing this going away. Unfortunately, just on the way opposite. Yeah.
Great, thank you. I think we have time for just a handful more. So I've got another one that come in saying, you mentioned agentic honeypots to catch the autonomous AI. So what does that actually look like technically? The end question is, how do we build one? So without this turning into another webinar about the instruction sort of manual,
Yeah,
any quick advice and guidance? It's a good idea. We may follow up with some content that relates to
yeah.
this, but any advice or guidance that you could give our audience?
Yeah, so first of all, there is the aspect that I talked about in this slide, but of course there are many more. So it relies on what we call indirect prompt injections. So technically, basically embedding hidden text within sensitive internal database or Confluence page, for example, like white text on the white background or text hidden in the metadata. So when a human employee will never see it, but if an unauthorized autonomous AI agent scraps that page, it reads the hidden script, which says something that basically tells it to do something, and by that it exposes this rogue agent AI. There are, of course, other other layers of these agentic honeypots. So it basically not just the language model itself, like the agentic honeypot also given tools or API. So if a scammer like sends a malicious link, for example, the honeypot agent could run the URL through an isolated sandbox environment to analyze it, or use a scraper tool to document the scammer's infrastructure and providing the SOC or the CTI team with this information to continue whether it's prevention or remediation processes. Yeah, this is
Got
like
it. Thank
example.
you.
That's very small types because it's like a whole topic. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. We only have so much time, so I appreciate the even that was great. So thank you. And then just one more. And I think I can see where this person's coming from. So we just spent a massive portion of our budget rolling out FIDO and passkeys across the enterprise. And I'm sure you can imagine where their thoughts are at now. Like, are we now wasting those budgets? Obviously investments have been made. These technologies have been sort of rolled out. And now we're finding again, this is just the continuous sort of fight. So anything that you can sort of mention about, tactics or methods or technologies that would help someone to get something out of that investment, or a different way of approaching it?
Yeah. So first of all, no, so not at all. I
Hmm.
mean, basically, passkeys and DBSC are absolutely, like I said, good steps in the right direction, and they are essential because they eliminate many of the, let's say, the initial noise, credential stuffing, basic phishing, and other MFA-related attacks. They successfully closed the front door, like I said. However, attackers, and specifically the more sophisticated ones, they will change tactics. That's what we know from our experience in the darknet. So even now, the data marketplaces that basically sells the zip file for $5 with the credentials, with the session cookies, it started a long time ago. It started by selling it one by one, exactly like now live access is sold, but are sold one by one. So we expect that this investment is good, but since we know that attacker adjust very fast and they want to monetize
Mm.
and they will not give in on their what they have, the goal that they have like on in their hands. So they will try to sell the live access itself and basically monetize the infrastructure, which is the infected compromised account and the infected compromised device. And that's why a complementary measure to the passkeys and DBSC is the info stealer log monitoring.
Mm.
That's how you can detect fast enough if your employees' infected machine are listed in the dark web.
Great, thank you. There was one question specifically about operationalizing Infostealer logs, but we don't have time. So the handful of questions that have come in that we haven't had time to answer, we'll make sure we answer those as a follow-up. So I appreciate everyone that sent a question. Leads me to say thank you very much for attending today. Hopefully you got value out of the session. We will be sending the email out with a link. You can click the QR code now and scan the QR code to get direct access to the report right now. Elad, thank you so much. Always a pleasure.
Thank you.
Great knowledge.
Thank you, everyone, for
appreciate your
joining.
time. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks.